All right, we are back with the February update. Yeah, a little bit farther along in the build than I was for the last one. Things are starting to click into place. I really try not to think about how my training is going at all in January. It's a long season, and as I've talked about a number of times before, I've done a really good job of peaking in April early on in my career. And one of the changes that I've made to try to set me up for better races when it matters in September, October timeframe is to really be a lot more laid back in January, especially, and not really focused on how things are going or how things are feeling, because they never feel good when you're coming out of shape and trying to force things, and not really putting too much mental capital into that and trying to save that for later in the season. And gets me in trouble with coaches a little bit. I'm sure Julie gets frequently frustrated because I just don't give any feedback or much feedback. Yeah, it probably makes it a little harder on her than it has to be, because I just tick the box green and then don't think about it the rest of the day. But now that I'm into February, mid-February now, I have to focus a little bit more on it because we're not that far away from Ironman South Africa. So I've been paying a little bit more attention than normal, and yeah, I'm pretty happy how things are going. Swim has been a lot more technique in January. We were targeting a minimum of 30,000 meters a week and doing a couple film sessions. I've been working with Brenton a little bit to just try to get some things in my stroke cleaned up. It's a little bit hard to do when bike and run volume are also really high and you just feel like your hips are sitting really low in the water. So it makes it a little bit harder to focus on technique work when you're not sitting with great body position anyways. But there's still things that we can do, and just keys and things to think about, especially when I'm going through the warm-ups and the lead-in sets. I try not to think too much about technique during the main set. Especially at the beginning. Maybe at the end when I start to get fatigued, I'll focus on holding things together. But yeah, I try to focus on, have the thinking cap on during the warm up and the preset, and then have the execute the main set later on in the set. Run training has been coming along really nicely, especially for January, February timeframe. We did some aerobic work, but then kind of went straight into 1,000 block. And so 6, 8, 10, 12. So I did 2 weeks of 12 by 1K repeats with 60-second rests. And those all went really well. I didn't have to force the pace. It was just there. I was going a little bit faster than we had hoped for. So really happy with how that's coming around. So next week I shift from thousands to 1 mile repeats and just kind of keep on that progression. That's kind of my Thursday speed day set. And then the rest has been a lot of aerobic volume with we did a hill block, and then just some surges, striders, things like that, to fill in the remainder. And then finally, I've shifted away from doing just plain 2 hours, 2-hour 15 aerobic runs, to having some race repeats or race pace repeats in my long runs. I'm not a guy that enjoys going out and just running for 2.5 hours. But I love a 2.5 hour run with some hard intervals or with some real intervals in it. And so got to do that this week. Added, I think, 3 by 20, and then we'll build on that going into South Africa as well. So I had 3 by 20, and then the whole set was 2 hours on the nose and was just north of 20 miles for that set. So happy with how that's going as well. Shifting into the biking, doing a lot of low cadence work, which my back is not a fan of, but it's a necessary evil. I'm glad we're doing it early in the season, so hopefully I can get back on top and get the back feeling a little bit better. But so my Monday has been shorter, high torque, like 30-second efforts, and then I'm carrying that into my long ride and doing like 4-minute blocks at high power, low cadence we're talking like 60 RPMs and over about 110% of FTP for those, and then going into long TT blocks. Just trying to use the time I'm kind of stuck in the trainer as efficiently as possible. Obviously, we're also doing plenty of position work as well. Okay, so we finished the ride. Now we get to go back and dive into the Dare 4 hub and look at all the data that we want to gain from it. I've done a full overview of both the sensor and the overview of the hub, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all the ins and outs of that. I'm really just going to focus on what we can gather from today's ride. Today's ride was just 2x10, and there was no real heart power variation. It was just, can I hold the same position looking at the computer and not looking at the computer. So a lot of the information that we can get from the hub just isn't valuable for today's ride. We can look at the analytics tab and you can definitely see where the two intervals were, but because there's no real heart rate variation or power change or anything like that, it's just not a valuable thing for what we're looking at. What we're going to do is look at the actual laps tab, and you can see the two 10-minute intervals here, and like you can see during the ride data that we talked about before, when I was looking at the Garmin the entire time, the average body angle was 11.4 and the average estimated CDA was 0.183. And power was a little bit lower, so that was right around 220, which is where I was supposed to be. Is just an hour easy in the 220 recovery zone for me. And then when we do the second one, we can see that I was a little bit better body angle wise. I was 11.0 versus 11.4. And so that means that the estimated CDA was 0.182 versus 0.183. And power was actually a little bit higher, which isn't that surprising, I guess. But my feel was for 220 was more like 235. So yeah, I mean, that's not that alarming. Obviously, I would love for my feel to be right on, but yeah, that's me being a little bit type A. But yeah, we can scroll down and look at what percentage of time that I spent in the TT ideal position. And for this, it was 100% for the second interval. If we look at during the warm-up, you can see that it obviously breaks it up a lot more. I spend a little bit of time in the bars, mostly when I was playing on the phone, and then sat some time on the hoods and a little bit of time standing and things like that. But yeah, so for today's ride, that's really what we can see. That's all I have for this time around. I'll be back hopefully mid-March before I head off to South Africa with a final update leading into that race. And yeah, then come back at you with a post-race report, hopefully with something positive to talk about, but we'll see you then.